like me to start?
Sure. You start.
So, no, thanks for having me. Thank you, Dario and Mev, for having me up here. I am, again, David Schwind from Sinch. You love my Sinch socks. It's great.
I have butterfly socks.
No, super happy to be here on this session talking about TCR and the campaign registry and your roadmap. So
Yes.
Something that I am always, quizzing TCR on and pressuring you to do things as a DCA.
Yes.
So we don't, we have a limited time here, so why don't we jump right into it? One of the, big things that's coming out shortly is this thing called Authentication Plus.
Yes.
So
We're
tell
very
me,
excited.
Where did it come from and what is it going to do?
We wanted to have something that started with the letter A and a plus on the end.
Yeah, right.
Yes, that's how it started. Now, Authentication Plus was actually a result of us looking at what was happening in brand registration and realizing there was a bunch of impersonation, thanks to the state of Florida, mostly. They have a very open way of making sure that every bad actor can get every piece of information and every brand registered for business in the state of Florida. Bless them. And there was impersonation happening at some very small brands. So about 4 months ago, we started developing Authentication Plus. And as we started to look at this, we realized that what we need to do is we need to know that a person at the brand actually worked at the brand. It's a stunning piece of logic. Do you actually work there? Yes, you do. Thank you very much for confirming that. So that is being introduced into Authentication Plus, which is basically taking our standard verification identity check process and adding extra elements to it to ensure that we actually have that brand is messaging. And when we did that, we were talking to our very good friends over at Aegis. I don't know if John's in the room. I think he might have left when he saw me get up on stage. I'll talk to him about that later, bastard. So Aegis sort of said, hey, we've got this list of requirements for RCS. We're like, do you now? That's interesting. That's exactly how the conversation went, actually. And he said, yeah, we've got this list. And I said, I'd like to see that list. He said, I'll show you that list. And he showed it to me. And I realized when I saw that list, this is a very long, drawn-out conversation. They only gave me 15 minutes. I don't know what they were thinking. That there were two fields, maybe it was three fields, that we were missing in the list of requirements that we put together for Authentication Plus versus what were the requirements that the carriers had been setting up for RCS.
So out of the 50 that you already collect, they were only missing 2? Are you only
Go
missing
figure. So we added, being smart people, we added those extra data fields in there. And so now we really have Authentication Plus is actually a first pass at somebody getting their brand, not the whole thing, but the brand validated for an RCS campaign. And that campaign also constitutes other parts, which are obviously the media parts of the RCS campaign, which are the logos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those would still have to be validated and verified. And so we are going to be launching Authentication Plus on October the 17th, which means that as brands go through this, well, the first launch, I should tell you about how that's phased in, shouldn't I, David? I should. So
I was going to talk about the phases and
okay, you talk about the phases.
So you're starting out with one kind of segment or brand type, right?
Yes, we are.
And why is that? And
yeah. So the first segment we're talking about going to is going to be the public for-profit entity types. So these are the very large enterprise-level brands. And there's in TCR, about 22,000 of them. So this is a good sample size for us to make sure that we're kicking the tires on the whole process, that we're making sure that everything can scale properly, that all of the processes can return the information in milliseconds. That is the idea. And then after we've actually done that initial phase, then we start the big phase 2.
The big dogs are going to come
The big
around.
dogs, yeah, that's exactly it. So in phase 1, all of these brands, 22,000 of them, are going to have to, via the CSPs, via the DCAs, And we've been trailing this, by the way, for months. So it's not like this is new news for anybody that follows and reads our wonderful release notes, right? I mean, because everybody reads release notes. I know we do. I do, all the time.
I'm directing people to your release notes in my
Thank you, David.
customer communication about it. Absolutely.
I appreciate that as well. We have a lot of documentation, a lot of information around it set up by our wonderful product team. And they would be heartbroken if people didn't read the release notes, you know. So,
Yes, I know.
yeah.
I know.
And I appreciate that you tell people.
No, so I think it's super exciting that you're doing this verification. I think it's super important to keep the bad actors out. Like
You know
we're
what
all
the other
trying
cool
to.
thing is we're doing?
What else are you doing?
That first iteration of that first 22,000, we're paying for it.
Ooh.
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 Right? So not only do these first 22,000 enterprise level bands get essentially a first step on the rung of getting RCS validation, they don't have to pay for it.
Does that mean somebody else is going to have to pay for it in the future?
Yes. In the future, there will be a charge that will be levied for Authentication Plus. But it's a small price to pay for the wonderful and exceptional value that's being offered by making sure that not only are you cutting out impersonation in the ecosystem, and we hate bad actors.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
we're doing that part, of course, but also one of the other critical things is that we're making sure that people can start to understand what RCS is all about and start to work with their DCAs and work with their CSPs and their connectivity partners to really be able to flow the information up through the existing process that we have today for 10DLC, but really just replace the words 10DLC with RCS. And you have the same flow, you have the same mapping back to the original brand. You can see every hop that it's gone through to get to you, the DCAs, who at the end of the day are registering it within Google's infrastructure. You're then you're testing it out, and then you're going, this is awesome or not. and we tell everybody down the chain whether it's awesome or not based on your reaction to it. So,
speaking of down the chain, right?
Is this a toilet joke?
There's this other topic that we were talking about, and it's near and dear to me. So you're talking about resellers.
Oh,
right?
Resellers.
Coming out
Yes.
later in Q4.
Yes.
About identifying resellers. And it's been like a thing that TCR's had for a while now. And I think, at least on the Sinch side, we've done a lot of work to try to identify those resellers so that everybody is identified kind of in the chain
Yes.
of command. So everybody knows like whose program it is, et cetera. So I think resellers, and I think you're moving in the direction of kind of mandating,
yes.
Telling us whether or not, or telling the industry whether or not it's a reseller doing that business or not, right? So what's coming out in the reseller aspect?
Yeah. So with the reseller field, the reseller field was there from the very beginning of TCR, and it was there to identify some people call it an ISV, some people call it a reseller. I call it a reseller.
Yeah.
So with the resellers, it was an indicator that you as an organization did not have the direct contract with that brand. That contract was owned by somebody else other than you, which means that if something went wrong, somebody could clearly see that you need to contact somebody else because this is not a CSP signed within the TCR sort of fold. It is signed directly to you, and you're operating on their behalf.
I was going to say, so in that regard, they're not a CSP.
Right.
Right. They've chosen for some, whatever reason, their business has not demanded that they go out and have a business relationship with TCR.
Correct.
But they've gone to their DCA and said, this is our business. Can you accept our business and accept our registrations? And lots of DCAs will say, sure, absolutely.
Right.
Let's identify you as a reseller.
Exactly, and identification as a reseller is a critical part of the mapping that I was talking about, because if it's not identified as a reseller, then it looks like everything is owned by the DCA, which is not accurate, and can sometimes cause negative issues, because anyone looking at that mapping and going, who's at fault here for this bad traffic, can point to the person that's listed as the owner of that relationship. And if you haven't put in the reseller information, it's incorrect information. So it means that it just helps everybody to understand how it's got there, and also to see if somebody's really abusing it, If a reseller is really abusing your platform, of course you'll know about it,
Right.
but other people may not obviously see it, and it needs to be kind of that shared information of here's how that brand is actually getting into the ecosystem.
So I think later in Q4, you're scheduled to make that kind of a mandatory field,
Yeah.
right? To either identify it as a reseller or not identify it as not a reseller. So
Correct.
either one way or the other.
Correct. And that was a critical choice because we realized that there were some people that weren't identifying it correctly.
What?
I know.
What?
I know. Heaven forbid, there are people that didn't do it.
Oh, shame.
And much as though, I said, I'm gonna have to have stern words with you, that didn't seem to be enough. So we're making it mandatory. And also this is something that we've previewed for everybody and people know it's coming, so they know that this thing is gonna have to be applied. And I know that Sinch, for example, have been wonderful in ensuring that not only have you done the current stuff going forwards and all the new ones, but you've gone back and you've attacked all of the legacy ones as well and mapped everything, which I really appreciate. Thank you, David. I will definitely take you on that Bavarian holiday. We can wear lederhosen together.
There you go. There
Okay.
you go.
So the other cool things is, of course, we've got fields in the campaign registry. Fields. Many fields. Many
yes.
fields. In the campaign registry, when we're looking at registering the actual campaigns, and I know that it has been a little bit of a source of frustration. I mean, and I know that you
For who?
for the DCAs.
For DCAs?
For DCAs, because
Why?
brands will come to you and go, it's optional in TCR, but you say it's mandatory. And so we're rectifying this by actually reviewing all of these fields again and making sure that we are in full alignment with the best practices in the industry. And so there are fields that were optional, and they were optional for a series of reasons that we are looking at making mandatory, but that decision's being taken probably over the next week or so. With full consultation with our stakeholders, which includes the DCAs.
Yes.
And we've already had your feedback, David, and it was a very long email. Thank you.
No, I think it's critical, all DCA's feedback to TCR about what the issues or the pain points that we're having, our customers are having, and especially when they want to move, from maybe DCA to DCA.
Right.
They go to somewhere else and they say, oh, why is this now mandatory or something like that? TCR doesn't require it.
Right.
So it creates a lot of friction, and I'm happy to see that, that you're taking steps to kind of look at those, industry guidelines, et cetera, and kind of do that kind of realignment.
Right.
I think a lot of these fields have been out there for a long time. There are some new fields.
There are.
That you just
The
implemented.
T's and C's and the privacy policy.
Yep. And even before that, maybe a year ago, there's some fields added. But
Right.
So I think it's good, just for the entire ecosystem, not just a 10DLC thing.
Right.
As we get into RCS, I think it's important.
Yes.
But alignment with toll-free and shortcode, historical information as well. So
Well,
I think all this is good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and that really sort of comes to how TCR and the DCAs work well together. We have our 10DLC Council that meets, and in fact, we had a meeting on Monday. For those that were there, thank you. For those that weren't there, you missed a great meeting. And for those that weren't invited, sorry. So it was a fantastic meeting. It just shows how we sort of help, everybody sort of gets involved in the ecosystem to help pull some of the lesser pieces of things that we're trying to do and make it better, to create less friction, to onboard things faster, to standardize things like error codes. It's a riveting subject, by the way. But standardizing error codes, standardization of any sort of element, whether it's the requirements to register or validate a brand, or register and validate a campaign, register or validate an RCS campaign, whatever it is, if you have a set of standards that have been approved by everybody in the ecosystem, it makes it less confusing to everybody, and it means that you can apply standards so that if you get validation and verification in TCR with our new Authentication Plus, that should be able to be translated into a shortcode registry or a toll-free registration. It should be applicable there because if we're meeting the highest requirements of registration, then a brand should be able to translate their credential into that space. And that's another thing that TCR is heavily involved in, of course, with the DCAs, is this creation of credentials, because those credentials are information about the brands and will be basically owned by the brands as we are all custodians of that information.
100%. But I think, I think a lot of this all has to do with just getting those bad actors out as well. So
oh, yes.
There's a lot of these initiatives are to identify people properly.
Yep.
Make sure they are who they say they are.
Yep.
Keep those bad actors out. Keep
Yep.
fraud and spam to a minimum.
Yep.
And to ensure alignment, across the industry, across DCAs and CSPs, and
Exactly.
so that it's consistent. It gets out there in the industry. So.
I couldn't have said it better. Look, we've got 1 minute and 5 seconds, 4, 6, 7. Wait, where's it going up? Have I got more time?
I don't know.
I've got more time according to this.
We've got
There's a
some
question?
questions.
Oh, wait. There's a question.
Who are you and what company do you work for?
You know who I am.
Yes.
I know that guy.
I love the sentiment about there's more actors in a chain than get represented, and so I kind of understand the motivation for this reseller tag or ID or whatever it is. But it seems like we have all these things that come along that solve legitimate problems, like NNIDs and DCA selections, and then it just creates this glue. And everything gets stuck and can't get undone. And if you're a brand and you want to move something, it's like impossible because everything's glued together notch by notch by notch. How are you going to prevent this from the reseller thing from just becoming another glued segment in the model?
It's a really great question, David. And the answer is that there are some awesome DCAs out there that envelop all of what we try and do and make sure that to the end user, it looks seamless and easy and straightforward because they take all of the difficulty and the administration and the to and froing out of the equation. We're representing the data that needs to be collected to make sure that we have validity of information in the ecosystem so that everybody can say, this has been checked, this has been validated. But for the brand, they don't necessarily need to know they've got to jump through 53 different hoops to do it. They can, when somebody's brought on from a KYC perspective, you're collecting a whole bunch of data at that point. And so when you're collecting that data, you can sort of already say that there's 20 things that don't need to be asked again because you've already got it. So in many cases, the CSPs and DCAs in the ecosystem are our best friends because they're making the job easier for the brands. I mean, Bandwidth has a fantastic way of being able to make it easy for their customers to get involved in the ecosystem, whether it's in voice, whether it's in messaging. And so I think everybody looks to sort of emulate that in some way, shape, or form. And I think everybody does some do a better job than others. But I think everybody works towards making it as seamless as possible because that onboarding, that faster onboarding means that it's going to be a better experience for people, and the better experience they have, the more they're going to use that ecosystem to be able to do more messaging and not necessarily move to another one because this one, to your point, sticks. Does that help?
Well, I think as well, we talked about it at the Monday call or meeting. We're just hoping that brand verification can just happen once.
Yes, that's the
So
other key thing.
Whether you're 10DLC, toll-free, RCS, short code, whatever it is in terms of messaging in the United States, we're hoping that the direction or the goal, is to just do one brand verification, and you can use it wherever you go, and whatever kind of sender type you choose.
And of course,
to do
that
business
applies for voice too, right? Oh, maybe it's
Why not?
this one.
Why not? Why not? But I think that's one area where I think that the industry is trying to come together to say, how can we make it more streamlined? Because, yeah, it's been a difficult road for 10DLC the last couple of years, for sure. Any other questions about TCR's roadmap?
Or David Schwind's last holiday.
Now is the time to stick it to them. Come on.
Yes, you don't get another opportunity because you never see me. That's true.
Right.
I think we're done.
All right.
I mean, we don't want to prevent Joe coming up here. You're welcome. Are we done? We're done.
No, we want to stay here.
Okay.
Well, say thank you, first of all.
Thank you.
Good
job.
Thanks,
Good
Stefan.
job. Thank you very much, David.
Better than release notes, I thought. I was a bit worried about the sexual tension at one point. I thought I was going to call HR. But no, we managed, and so far, no complaints. All good. Thank you very much. With or without Lederhosen, a big round of applause for
Thank
Stefan
you.
and David.
Thank you.